What's going on, fellas? If you're a regular on the channel, I'm sure you've noticed that I've been trying to start a variety of series because you've probably heard me complain that the part of making videos that I personally tend to struggle with a bit is coming up with what to make. I don't mind making them. I've got a indefinite amount of thoughts and opinions on strength training, as it's most of what I think about all of every day. So I'm more than prepared to give you guys plenty of opinions. It's just a matter of me getting stressed out about what video to make, as I am not a very creative person. So I figured the easiest way to work around this would be to create a rotation of video series. That way it's kind of it's a given where I'm at in the rotation. This is the kind of video that's being made today. Take away that decision-making process, so that way I can't freak out about it. So today I wanted to start up a different series called like exercise deep dives, name subject to change, right? Where I give you guys exercises that I think are solid exercises. I think the notion that all exercises are equal, which is something that's kind of been pushed recently. There is no good, bad exercises, just right and wrong times to prescribe them. I tend to disagree with that. Just practically speaking, there's some motions that are pretty shit, and there's some motions that are really good for most people. You know, I mean, a really easy example is a tricep kickback just isn't a great exercise in my opinion. I can't think of a time at which I would give someone that over a more a better strength curve type tricep exercise. So I'm going to give you guys the ones I think are pretty solid. It's going to be a wide variety. I think that there's some exercises that work great for some and work terribly for others, and that's a-okay. I'll put them out there. It might not mean it's for you, but it is an exercise that I find that a lot of people will benefit from. What I think they offer in terms of a hypertrophy stimulus, what I think they offer in terms of a strength stimulus, and then maybe some tips and tricks as to programming them. So today's video, we're going to talk about hack squats. Hack squats are a phenomenal exercise. We're going to start looking at this through the hypertrophy lens, and then we'll switch over to the strength lens in a moment. From a purely hypertrophy lens, these are a god tier exercise. If I had to pick between the two, I might pick a hack squat over a barbell squat for just pure leg hypertrophy development, as we're taking it through a similar motor pattern, but because we don't have as many technical elements, it's kind of idiot proof. It's easy to standardize the range of motion, and it's easy to make sure that the limiting factor is the musculature that we want it to be. Whereas in a squat, the limiting factor can very easily become your stability. It can become your hips. It can become your lower back. It can be your upper back, your core. It can be a variety of things that aren't the muscle group that we're intending to take to or near failure. So it's a great motion. Please don't take this as an excuse not to squat. Do both. These whole, like, if you had to pick one of the other questions are more often than not an excuse for someone to get out of doing an exercise that they don't want to do. Whereas in a practical program, there's no reason you shouldn't be doing both of these if you have access. Now, the reason I love the hack squat, as we talked about, we can take the squat through a huge range of motion without the same mobility demands that a really ass to grass style back squat or front squat would take. We don't have the limiting balance. We don't have quite the same skill factors. We're training purely muscular capacity at that point, which is great for hypertrophy training. One of the downsides to a hack squat is, especially if your quads are weak, but also some hack squats are just really shitty, they can be pretty tough on your knees, especially if your quads are weak. But that's almost a symptom of the issue, not an issue with the machine. So building up your quads with time can be helpful. Doing higher reps until you've kind of adapted to the motion can be helpful. If you have a shitty hack squat, things that can help are leaving your knee sleeves on, reverse banding the hack, so that way in the most taxing position on the joint, we have a little bit less weight. Most hack squats are pretty easy to reverse band. These are little things you can do to work around the issues, but if you've got a real shitty hack, the angles are off, it might just be an exercise that you never do. It might just be that the angle of the foot pad, the angle of the slide, the strength curve just adds up to an exercise that's too tough on your knees. There are some makes of hack squats that are very much that way, where I wouldn't even use them, even though I adore hack squats. What I love about hack squats, because of all the reasons we mentioned earlier, the great range of motion, the great limiting factors, the heavy loading through a great range of motion, if you are getting stronger in a variety of rep ranges, which is what I would recommend if you're using the hack squat for For purely hypertrophy purposes, I would try to get stronger in the 8 to 12 range. I would try to get stronger in the 12 to 15 range. And I would definitely even try to get stronger in that 15 to 20 rep range. If your rep PRs, you're beating the books and your motion quality isn't going down, if you're beating the books across those varied rep ranges, it might just be pyramiding up to one set of 8 to 12, followed by one back down set of 15 to 20. That is a great hypertrophy stimulus for not just your quads, because we're going to a deep squat position. We're going to be working our adductors quite a bit, and we're going to be working our glutes quite a bit. But more often than not on a hack, the limiting factor is going to be the quads. As long as we are taking our stance, we are putting it relatively narrow. It doesn't have to be crazy narrow. You don't have to obsess about crazy narrow, but then as low on the pad as we can without our heels peeling up in our bottommost position. So the lowest we can get it given our ankle mobility, and somewhat narrow. We're going to target the quads a little bit more directly that way. And then the other thing you can do is if you've got a shitty hack or just hacks bang up your knees, making sure hack squats are not the first motion in your leg training session. Either doing leg extensions, some other shit first, A, to pre-exhaust, so the amount of weight you need to use goes down a little less wear and tear on the joint, but B, just getting blood flow around the joint, moving the synovial fluid around can be, make an exercise that would have been painful at first, completely painless if we do it last. So we can always play around with our exercise ordering as well to facilitate this. But what I was saying is if we're getting stronger across a variety of rep ranges on a hack squat, we have the stimulus there to grow. It's now on you to go home, eat what you're supposed to eat, sleep, and do that over and over. The stimulus is there. It's kind of the ball is now back in your court as far as giving your body the resources it needs to grow. So absolutely phenomenal. I might play around with your exercise ordering if it gives you knee problems or if you just prefer to do so. You can try customizing the exercise a little bit by keeping the reps a little higher and or reverse banding if it's tough on your knees. But if you have a good hack squat at your gym and you're training for hypertrophy, astergrass hack squats are about as good as it gets. You might have to ease into the exercise, but I think that it is a phenomenal hypertrophy exercise. Going over to the strength perspective on this exercise, I don't think this is a great strength exercise. I generally speaking like to keep my my lower body strength motions a little bit more dynamic, i.e. you're not locked into a machine, you're having to balance, you're having to stabilize through your midsection, because that's what's going to make that task of squatting carry over to a variety of other tasks, is that you're being forced to stabilize through the midsection, you're being forced to stabilize through the hips. It's going to correlate with a lot of other tasks that you're going to do, and it's going to have more transference to a wider variety of things. Easy example of this is someone who's a monster squatter can hop on a hack squat and do a huge set. Someone's a huge hack squatter cannot necessarily do the same at all. I've met some guys who do good ass to grass hack squats, but because they lack the trunk and hip stability, they're not able to put up significant numbers in the squat at all. So I'd say do that greater transference, and we want our strength to be transferable across a lot of tasks. I generally speaking wouldn't use something where we're locked into a range of motion like this as a strength motion, but it absolutely has a place within a strength training program. Once we get our lower body strength work done, and we maybe have, we're in a phase where we have hypertrophy work after our strength work, which if you're a beginner or intermediate, that should be basically all of your phases. We have studies showing that most of the variety in strength level and high level powerlifters can be attributed to differences in how much muscle mass they have in their primary movers early in your training career. You should always be looking to develop more mass in the primary movers, in my opinion. So I think that most of the time you should have some kind of accessory work after your strength work in most of your phases, outside of like the last little bit of meat prep where we're focusing on putting on muscle. And that's where the hack squat can really shine. Because we're already kind of taxing our knees, taxing our hips from the squats, I would probably avoid that 8 to 12 range, so the heavier end of the bodybuilding work on the hacks, just because we don't want to bang up our knees. We can get a great hypertrophy stimulus out of a lighter weight by taking it for a little higher reps. So what I like to do for hack squats, for those of us who are interested in strength training, is after we hit whatever our kind of squat is, towards the end of the day, where a lot of people might program leg extensions, I like to program one high rep, really tough set of hack squats, like a 20-25 rep set, working really hard. I just find that higher rep set, we're limiting the load, right? We only need to do one set because it's hard as all hell. There'll be plenty of stimuli or stimulus, right? But on a set for set basis or a rep for rep basis, the amount of hypertrophy, the amount of the outcome we're looking for that we're going to get from this hack squat is going to be 10 times what we're going to get for a set for set basis on a leg extension. So, hey, if a limiting factor on our squat is we need bigger legs, we can just look and say, man, I don't have very big legs. That's probably why I'm struggling to get my squat to go up. Including 1 to 2 times a week, depending on how your knee tolerates it, a high rep, tough, real give it your all kind of set of hack squats at the end can be quite helpful. Just beat the books there. Like I said, if you do that and you're progressively overloading your set of like 15 to 20, and we're getting into moving some decent weights for 15 to 20, that's a huge stimulus. If we're throwing a couple of plates on there, doing astragas hack squats for 20, that's plenty of stimulus. So now you have the stimulus for growth on top of your strength training. Again, the ball is in your court to go home and eat, and you will get the big legs that you need to squat more weight. I do like keeping them higher reps though, to avoid A, stressing out the central nervous system with like a crazy heavy weight for a set of like 8. B, keep that joint stress lower. And C, I find that higher rep sets tend to have more of a therapeutic effect on the joints, whereas maybe heavier sets have a little bit more of a deleterious. So if we get a ton of blood flow, get a crazy pump from a set of 20, the knees will sometimes even feel better. Whereas if we do a heavy set of 8, they might feel a little bit worse. And we want our accessory work for powerlifting to A, stimulate hypertrophy, but also in a perfect world, we do it in almost a therapeutic way. Mr. Butler, Bald Omni Man, mentioned how he, for the longest time, didn't do any direct tricep work. He's got long arms, he's a strong presser, figured they were getting plenty of stimulus, and anything else that he would do would just tax the joint more. But recently he started doing rope press downs, right? And not only is it an additional stimulus that he can, or more volume that he can recover from, which is going to be beneficial, but it almost has a therapeutic effect on the joint itself, which I've found tricep rope press downs to generally have for most people. I find that like banded leg press can have a pretty therapeutic effect for the knees. And I think higher rep hack squats, if you're someone who tolerates them well, can also have a very therapeutic effect for the knees. So not only are we getting in that extra training volume, that extra hypertrophy stimulus, but we're actually getting a lot of blood flow to what is a largely an avascular area of our body, and basically facilitate healthier joints while doing so. So that would be my deep dive. I'm hoping I didn't miss anything. I think I hit all my checkpoints. Leave a like if you liked the video. Thank you for watching.